Hey, it's Big T. Today I'm going to tie a fly called the Chattahoochee Bomber. It was inspired by a fly called the Au Bomber. Inspired is just a different word for I copied it and added something to it and changed the name. Which is what we do in fly tying for the most part. So many patterns have been created already. You just make a variation and add to it a little bit. So what I've got here is I have a barbless terrestrial hook, and this is a size 10. And then I've got some Danville fluorescent orange thread. And I'm going to tie that to the back of the hook bend. The next step is going to be to grab a little bit of elk hair. This is bleached elk hair. This is going to be for the tail. And I'd say I'm using about a fourth of what I would use for, say, a elk hair caddis type wing casing. Or wing, rather. Even up the tips in a hair stacker. As you see, those come out generally even there. And when I tie this down, first thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to have a big tail. This is going to be a shorter tail. But if I tighten down really hard on this to begin with, it's just going to totally splay. All the fibers are going to come straight out, and it's going to make it harder for me to trim. So I'm going to take some loose wraps up to about 2/3 of the way up. And then I'm going to bring it back down to the bottom. And once I get down to the bottom, that's when I'm going to really tighten down and have those fibers splay out. Wrap back up and trim off my excess. And clean this up a little bit. I'll be covering that, however, so I don't have to be too tidy. Got one little end here that's going to drive me nuts. Alright, I'm going to tie in a hackle feather next. This is just a good old grizzly hackle feather. This is from a whiting silver saddle. These are great feathers to start out with if you're not really experienced with dry flies, because this feather right here, I guarantee, is a good 10 to 12 inches long with a real consistent length fiber. It gives me a lot of room to palmer that around the hook. The next thing I'm going to do for my body, this is New Zealand strike indicator wool. That's a good system if you're looking to indicate or nymph fish, but land something light versus a traditional thingamabobber, and still have the versatility of being able to change depths. This fly that I'm tying here, I will most likely use in a suspension nymphing situation also. As a dry dropper, this will be my indicator. So we're going to dub on some of that black New Zealand strike indicator wool and wrap this up the body. Take that back so I can get it twisted on my thread a little bit better. This does not dub fantastically. However, it's a very buoyant material, and I do like it on flies that I'm going to use as an indicator. It's not wanting to cooperate, so I am going to remove some of that and reapply. You can use just a traditional dry fly dubbing if you'd like. Now that we've got that wrapped up, we want to go up to about the 2/3 way up our hook shank. I don't want to go further up for fear that I'm going to crowd my eye. I'm going to take some Grizzly micro olive legs, and this is where we get a little different than the traditional all sable bomber. It does not have legs. And I'm going to take about an inch piece. I like to fold it over the thread and bring that around. And I can place that up where I want it. And once that's in and secured, I'll wrap a couple more times. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, on the tire side, where I come around the thread with the legs and wrap that down. Alright, now that we've got that in place, I'm going to add a little bit of orange. This is a Polypro yarn. This is most often used as a parachute post on parachute style flies. I'm tying this in more just as a visibility trigger, so this fly is a little bit easier to see. Once I've tied it down, the two pieces down, I'm going to grab them together and I'm going to start wrapping around just like I would if I was creating the post on a parachute fly. And this is going to be to keep this upright and more visible. So I've wrapped up and back down. I'm going to come behind my leg there. At this point in time, I'm going to trim this a little bit.
Some of the cameras we were looking at, but they do say our lanes are technically blocked here.
Don't need a traffic report going on right now. And I think I'm going to leave the legs at that length right now and come back and trim them. I'm going to add a touch more of the dubbing to the thread. And this is also an area where you can experiment and change colors to give a little bit of contrast to the front part of the fly. And I'm going to wrap once behind our legs, come in between once, and then I want to take these legs and pull them backwards and wrap up a little bit. I've left a generous amount of space up front, if you notice, so that I don't try and crowd that eye. The next and final step is going to be palmering our dry fly hackle around. And this is where having that long feather really comes in handy. Make sure I didn't trap that booger. Good. Because I want to try and walk that thing all the way up behind that post. And then I'm going to, I think I can sneak one more in a little closer here. I'm going to come in front of these back legs, which will keep them back, and then take it up in front of the front legs. I'm going to make a couple turns up front before I secure this down. Alright. Take our thread over top of the hackle a few times, and then I'm going to drop a couple in front. Alright, we've got that secured. I like on my dry flies to use a half hitch tool, especially if I've done a good job not crowding this one. That's normally not the case, unfortunately. But if I take a half hitch tool and I make that for my finishing knot, I'm able to push some of those fibers that may have strayed forward, back. And then you can take a touch of Zap-A-Gap or finishing head cement and put it on your bodkin. Trim off that feather. Put it on your bodkin and apply that. To the head of the fly to secure it down. The length of these legs I'm okay with, so I'm going to leave them. You could trim those a little shorter, and I might be just a hair long on this side, but that's kind of up to you. Great fly for